Well, hello, and if you've been listening to the podcast or you've stumbled across this video by pure chance of Googling or hitting the YouTube search filter on Azure Lighthouse, then welcome. So yeah, this is a follow-on from a podcast episode that we'll leave the links to in the YouTube description. But me and Ryan are talking about Azure Lighthouse and how it's changing the way that partners and large organizations with multiple tenancies can access and gain and manage their resources within different Azure subscriptions or tenants. So Ryan's got a great slide here that he's found, and it saved me actually having to go and create it. So yeah, I think this is really key to just sort of go through how it changes from today. So Ryan, do you want to talk about how it works today, like how before Lighthouse existed, what people would have to do effectively to get access to other people's subscriptions in different tenants?
Yeah, absolutely. So back when I worked as a partner with Jack as well, typically we'd have guest access to each one of our customers' Azure environments. It would be a guest account or just a service account or something like a generic account. Worst case scenario, big security no, but it does happen. And it would just be a nightmare because if that person left the organization, you then have to go through and see what accounts they've got access to, their named accounts in different customers' environments, make sure that they're disabled, passwords reset, all the rest of it. And it could be a bit of an admin headache. So as a Lighthouse looks like it can be that single source of identity for customer environments. It can really simplify things.
Exactly, and that's what's shown in that diagram here, right? So, the MSP tenant here has got access via guest access into all of those different customer subscriptions or resource groups into their own directory. So, obviously each customer will have their own directory. And then, moving on how Lighthouse plays this, this is what Lighthouse effectively does. So flipping it on its head effectively, where you make the customer's tenancies and subscriptions trust your directory or your partner's directory or your large group owner sort of organization that has you're one of the opcos from it, but you make them trust one tenancy for the source of identity, and you're effectively delegating the subscription or the resource group and the resources within those to that tenancy, and basically trust those identities to access it. So all of those guest user accounts go away, and you don't have to effectively worry about it, and a customer can remove those delegations at any time. But we covered that in a bit of detail on the podcast, so I won't go into it too much. So go and listen to the podcast, and you can hear more about how it works and beneath the scenes. I think what we want to get into now, right, Ryan, is a bit of a demo on like how it works and see it in action.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So Jack's kindly set this up in a lab for us. It'd be great to see it in detail. So yeah, if you could share your screen, Jack, that'd be fantastic.
Awesome. So hopefully you guys can all see that, and we will crack on. So I'm going to log into a tenant called jtlab.cloud. So this is effectively, treat this as my partner tenant or my group tenant that manages, has multiple operating companies beneath it. This is my top level tenant effectively, where I want to manage and delegate people to. So if I'm going to log in here and actually use the right username, that's probably a good idea. Obviously following best practices and having things like MFA enabled, because I practice what I preach. Log in there. Cool. So once I log in here, we'll be presented to my dashboard. Now, this dashboard is just an Azure resource graph based dashboard. So all of these are resource graph queries. And as you can see, I've got 443 resources across my current scope selection. And that's a really critical point, because if I hit this directory and subscriptions filter in the top right hand corner, you'll see it says current and delegated directory. So I've already got this set up. So as you can see, this is my main directory. But as you can see, I've got these other two listed where I've got some directory IDs actually listed as well. The reason that we got directory IDs listed as well is something me and Ryan were chatting about before we started this episode is by default, your directory gets called default directory. And not every customer remembers to change that because it's not actually that critical. You only notice it in a few places. So yeah, you can have the case where you've got multiple customers or multiple directories in here, all listed as default directory. So the tenant ID becomes very useful in that case.
So just to be clear there, Jack. So these are different instances of Azure AD linked to completely separate Azure tenants, right?
Yeah, exactly. So different Azure Active Directory domains, all that host subscriptions that I've got access to via Lighthouse. So, for example, if I was to say, let's only have a look at my my MSDN one, where I've got a lot of MSDN subscriptions. If I was to go in here and then go, as you can see, it's automatically changed the scoping and the query on the left. So it's automatically gone and readjusted. So we were at 400 of resources. Now it's only over 270 because I've changed the filter. So obviously I'm seeing less subscriptions, and I can drill down in here and, change subscriptions out that I want to see, and, it'll readjust. So it's really nice and easy to do. But also I can do that across tenancy. So I could say, actually, I want to see across multiple tenants and multiple subscriptions. I've hit resource graph a little bit too hard there, and it's had a bit of a fit, but you get the idea. You can query across multiple things at scale, and when you had all your customers listed here, you can just change here. But I haven't got to go and log in or go here and do the normal way I'd have change directory, or go here and do switch directory. I haven't got to do that anymore because it's trusting my jtlab.cloud tenancy. So if I was to actually go into Lighthouse and go into the place where you manage these delegations and look at them, so you get to this place, so manage customers at scale. You can also, if your partner has got an offer published into the marketplace, you can select it from here. Or if you've got you want to manage your offers and stuff that you've published, then you can go into here and manage that. But we're going to the manage your customers part. So because this is my managing tenant, and if I click on customers, you'll see here that I've got this tenant that I've delegated to, and I've got one subscription as a delegation. And I've also got another tenant here that we saw in the drop-down list from the top right directory and subscriptions filter as well, that I've got 6 subscriptions delegated from. Now, you can delegate subscriptions or resource groups. You can't delegate management groups at the moment. That is something that has been fed back. I certainly fed it back to the product group when I worked in Partnerland because it had been great to have. But it's really easy to loop through subscriptions, and once you've done one, it's really easy to go back into like the customer side and just add a delegation very quickly.
One thing I've just noticed on your screen, Jack, is that cloud solution provider preview. What's that all that about? Is that a new feature?
This is really cool. Yeah, so obviously CSPs need access into their customers' environment all the time, because that's the whole idea of a CSP, is that they are the people that manage and help you with your Azure environment instead of going through to Microsoft directly. So what that does is effectively, if you provide a customer a subscription from a CSP model that is linked to the same tenant that you're using as your identity provider. So for an example, say we're Acme Support Company and we have a CSP tier 1 status set up with that same directory, so Acme Support Company. When we create or provision a new subscription for a customer, it automatically does a Lighthouse delegation for you, and it'll appear in here.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, it's basically making that CSP world a lot lighter. And obviously in the partner world, there's new things around incentives. So partner admin link, and you're basically given a percentage back from Microsoft for being the CSP based on how much access you have to a customer's environment. So if you had access only over one resource group, you'd only get the incentive back on that one resource group. Whereas if you had it over the whole subscription, you'd get the incentive over that whole subscription. So that's where this comes into play, because partners can't afford to get this wrong now, because they could potentially lose out on incentives back from Microsoft. And that was certainly a focus at my last place, that we had to make sure that we made sure the incentives were coming back through. So yeah, that's a new thing that's coming through. So if I click on that, I won't see anything. But if I then look into delegations, you can see all the subscriptions that I've been delegated to here. So as you can see from this directory, my North Star or enterprise scale, if any of you are doing that, and again, that's another episode we probably need to do. But this is my directory that I set up for that, and I've got one subscription inside of there. I can click on this role assignments here, and I can actually see what's delegated. So I can see that this is the offer description, this is the offer name. The subscription that I've been delegated access to and its ID. Because I'm not in the marketplace, I haven't got any offer details. But if I was part of the marketplace, you'd see those details here. And then you get to see some details about the service provider. So this is my directory name of my managing tenant, and this is the directory ID of my managing tenant. So the customer, or the opco of a large organization, can always see who that is and the directory ID of that. So if they're looking through logs, they know what it is. And then down here is really, really important. So you can see that I've got 3 role assignments here on this subscription from my managing tenant. So I've got an account that's called my backdoor admin account, which is sort of like my break glass account. And that's got contributor permissions over this subscription. And then I've got 2 groups inside of my current Azure Active Directory tenant, one called IT Admin Full Control and one called IT Admin Read Only Control. and these are actually synced from synced from Active Directory on-prem that runs on a VM in Azure and is synced up to Azure AD via Azure AD Connect. So, and as you can see, differing level of permissions. So if I logged in with a user that's part of this group, I'd only have reader permissions, and if I logged in with a user of in this group, I'd get contributor permissions over those. And they would obviously get differing views when they use this blade based on what they've got access to. So really, really flexible. And at the moment, I think it's only really done via the marketplace or via using the ARM templates that you've got out there that are in the sample repository from the Lighthouse. So that leads really nicely on to showing how it works beneath the scenes. So we've talked about the ARM template a few times and how you do it. So this is my parameters file that I supply to the ARM template. So the actual ARM template itself is here, and this is just, I've changed nothing in this. This is the one that's available on the samples repo for a subscription delegation. But as you can see here, there's lots of parameters to fill in, and it will obviously put them in the relevant places. But as you can see, it's just a new resource provider, as we discussed. So if I look at my parameters file from my example that I'm showing you here, you can see, so here's my offer name that we saw at the top, my offer description, my tenant ID for the managing tenant that I want to use, and then the authorization. So these are the role assignments. So as you can see, I've got my backdoor admin account, and this is the object ID of that user account in my Azure Active Directory. And then I've got this role definition ID, which is actually the ID of the contributor role that is just published on the Azure documentation. So all the built-in RBAC roles have the definition ID that you can put in here. So I will put a link to those in the show notes as well. That's actually a really good point as well. You can't do custom RBAC role assignments at the moment. That's another thing that's not supported. So you can only use the built-in ones. But there's 70 odd of them. I don't see a lot of people making custom ones anyway. And if they are, I don't think they're genuinely needed most times. I don't think they're just not looking outside of the roles that outside of what reader, owner, contributor, and user access admin. They don't really look past those. So yeah, there's lots of flexibility out there. So yeah, really easy to set up, as you can see. So you would fill in this, and if you wanted to have multiple assignments, you copy that object. Make sure you're using JSON, so put another comma, and off you go. Fill out the details, save that, and then when you deploy the template, again, all the instructions are on the Azure Lighthouse documentation on how to do this. That's how you basically assign a delegation from a customer perspective.
Fantastic. And Jack, you mentioned the marketplace a few times. Is it obviously it's linked to the standard Azure marketplace, but could you show how that works with Lighthouse quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to go back into Azure Lighthouse or found that from the top, so go Azure Lighthouse, you can click here and go open Azure Marketplace, and effectively you choose the regional country that your partner's from, and you can go and find. So we'll choose the UK here, and it's mentioning Azure Expert MSPs because this is a requirement of Azure Expert MSPs to use Lighthouse. And as you can see, we've got all these different partners here that I've got Lighthouse set up, and we can effectively click on those, add their delegation, and that's as simple as it is. So if you're a partner, it's 100% worth the effort to try and get your stuff on the marketplace. Speak to your PDM, that they'll absolutely support you on that journey on how to get it onto the marketplace. But yeah, definitely get on there. Otherwise, you're in the case of passing ARM template files and parameter files to your customers, or logging in with them over a screen sharing session and doing it for them. So it can get pretty complicated. And then I think the real power is, as you saw, right, we can query across all of these different subscriptions at scale. So I can say all of these customers that I've got access to, let's say all of the subscriptions, and boom, I can see all of these resources from all of these different subscriptions and tenants, all from one central view. So it's really good for a partner. Now, if I was to pick one of these, for example, so I pick this VNet, for example, I was obviously doing an ARM what if demo somewhere along the line, very aptly named, but really important. You can see here this new field here, which some people have noticed in their Azure portal, but this didn't exist initially, and it was really hard. Like if you were buried deep in a support case, and you were like, oh, which customer? Say every customer had their VNet name VNet1.
It could be very dangerous, couldn't it?
Exactly. So this has been added now, where you actually see the directory that it's coming from. So as you can check effectively, that would show the customer's directory name. So obviously another reason to make sure your customers changed it from default directory. And help them change that as well, because that was certainly part of my last partner's onboarding process.
So I guess this kind of reaffirms that security point, doesn't it? Where you show all of those resources from potentially all those customers. To me, potentially that's a really scary thing, because an engineer or a support desk person could accidentally screw up an environment without meaning to, because they've just got full access to everything. So just putting that point out there, where just make sure that the stuff that you're supposed to have read-only access to, make sure this is set up correctly. So whoever you're delegating Lighthouse to for your customers, make sure that you've got the right boundaries and stuff in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And one really important factor is the other way around. So we saw in the Azure Lighthouse that we can see all the delegations that I've got access to from, my fake customers, which are my other tenants. As you'll see, there's no option to remove these. And I can't say, actually, I don't want, say you had the scenario where somebody delegated their subscriptions to you, to a partner, but you knew nothing about that customer. You've never heard of them before. You've got no relationship with them, no contracts, no billing, anything like that. There's no way to remove it from here. However, this is because when I did it, I didn't actually create a role assignment for, there's a new RBAC role called Managed Services Role Assignment Delete. Like it's a very custom role, which basically, if you put that in your parameters file, and again, this is listed in the Lighthouse documentation. So if you had a group that was almost like, your IT admin full control, for example, you could say that they've got this Managed Services Delete role. And when you assign that template, we'll actually get a delete button here. So if that appeared, I could remove a customer because we're like, well, actually, we don't have a relationship with you. We don't know who you are, all that sort of stuff. Or again, you might have that place where a customer stops paying you for services, and you go through that legal battle and sort of those things, and you want to remove any services you're providing to them. It's an easy way to go and manage it. So there is a role for that now, but there wasn't initially.
Hypothetically, if somebody was to accidentally delete that delegation, do you then need to go through the whole process of re-enrolling the customer?
I'm afraid so, yeah. If a customer's got multiple subscriptions, or you've delegated to multiple sort of resource groups or subscriptions in that customer, it's a lot easier because the offer will already exist in their side. So you haven't got to re-upload that definition of the offer that you've given them. So effectively, these parameters are saved in their tenant and their subscriptions. So you can literally go on the customer side. And that's actually probably a really good point. Let me just log in from the customer side really quickly. So let's just do this. Let me log into one of those customers. So if I go, different spelling of my name. This one, passwordless auth. If you're not using that, that's really cool. So this is the one that was referenced to as Jack Tracy MSD NAAD in my other lab. So this is now from a customer's perspective. Obviously, I can only see stuff within my subscription, so I can't see anything outside. Obviously, I've got access to some others via guests, and this is what you would typically see if you were guest invited. But if I now go into Azure Lighthouse, and I go manage service provider offers, because I'm a customer at this stage. And if I look at my service provider offers, you can see when this loads. Come on, the demo gods.
There we go.
So, as you can see, so this is my jtlab.cloud tenant, and you can see I've delegated 6 subscriptions from here, and here's that lovely delete button. So I could hit delete, or I could hit add. So say I've got another subscription that I want to add, or a resource group. This is how easy that is. So I can say delegate a subscription. Obviously, I've got no more subscriptions to add. I've already added all of these, but I could just say, yep, delegate that one. And you know what? Delegate that specific resource group and there, and select the offer. Obviously, I've only got one in here in this tenant, but I hit delegate and off I go.
Interestingly, I saw the option of adding more than one service provider as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point, actually. So you could have multiple partners or multiple operating companies above you that want access to your environment. You're not tied down to one. You can have people managing the same or different resources. And, I think you brought up an example in the podcast, Ryan, where you might want a security partner to have access to things like Sentinel, but they don't need access to any of the other resources. They don't need to know about your VMs or your Windows Virtual Desktop estate or anything like that. They just need the logs. And that's in the Sentinel workspace. So you would only give them or delegate, the resource group or the subscription that contains the Sentinel resource. Don't give them access to the whole. Don't give them the keys to the kingdom. Give them what they need.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's another way of doing it. So yeah, really easy to manage, and I could remove individual permissions if I wanted to. And then from that customer side, just to complete the conversation, I can also look at what the customer's got. So I can see the names of their groups and the name of their users that they've delegated to me. So nothing's really hidden. It's no smoke and mirrors from the partner side. What the partner sees is what you see, or what the operating company sees is what you see. So you can see the managing tenant's ID, the name of it, and the offer details, and what users they granted what. So if part of your contract was it had to be a named individual, they absolutely could do that and update it here. So yeah, it's very clear about who's got what access at what level. And finally, to finish off, you can't grant owner permissions, because obviously the partner could then assign themselves permissions, which breaks the point of delegating access. And you can't do any data action roles at the moment. Again, that's some feedback that's gone back that a lot of people are looking into, and I think the teams are looking at whether that's something they will add to the products if they see the use case for it and the demand for it. But so you could, for example, have access to manage a storage account and enable things like encryption or enable HTTPS, but you haven't got access to go and read the blobs and the data or in file shares or tables or anything like that. Cool. So yeah, so that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of Lighthouse. I actually did an interesting Twitter poll on this last week, and I had 20 people vote on it. And I literally asked, who's using Lighthouse? Because honestly, I think it's gone under the radar. I don't think a lot of people know it exists. Certainly, a lot of partners that I speak with are like, oh yeah, we just do guest access, and I'm like, well, use Lighthouse. It's going to save you a lot of effort and a lot of hassle. I gave 3 options. So I gave one that was me. I'm definitely using it. I gave one that's what's Azure Lighthouse, and I gave another one that says I tried but I'm not using it. 40%, so the majority of the vote was like, what's Azure Lighthouse?
Right.
So hence this podcast. Hopefully we get a bit of knowledge out there. We'll leave loads of links in the description of this video and the podcast show notes. Go and check it out. Go and play with it. It costs you nothing. Super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're new to the Sussex Azure user group, check out our website, sussexazure.uk, for other podcast episodes and content.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.